All right, it looks like we're back online now. I'm not sure why that live feed cut out. I was just talking away, and all of a sudden the feed cut out and said that my live video was finished, and it sure was not. So I'm not sure why that was the case, but we're back online now, and I'm trying to pull it back up to make sure that I'm simulcasting here on the page, so I can see comments as well. Yeah, it looks like that is the case. So I'm not sure what caused that little outage. So hopefully it doesn't happen again. If so, I'll jump right back online. But thanks to everyone for hopping back online. Going back to what I was talking about, though, the National Hurricane Center forecast cone, not much change with the 8 p.m. update. They may bump it up to a Category 3 hurricane at the 11 p.m. advisory. That's not really a big deal in terms of the impacts. I mean, 5 mile per hour on the categorization scale is not going to make or break any impacts from Dorian as it approaches the coast. Hi, again from Chesapeake. Yeah, I actually have I told you last night that you can expect tropical storm force conditions, but actually I remember you asking last night, and that area may see a little bit more impacts in terms of some gustier winds and heavy rain, and we'll get into that in just a few minutes. If you don't see your location scrolling at the bottom there, you can, I'm going to go in more depth in just a few minutes and go through in-depth impacts city by city, county by county, kind of geographic areas to give a more in-depth analysis of what we can expect. So here's the track, and it's all well and good going up into the northern Atlantic, but we are most concerned with the area right in here. So we can cut that track down to 3 days, and you can, if you overlay the line on the track, you can see that line cutting right across Cape Lookout and Cape Hatteras. So again, I think it's pretty well established now that the Carolinas will get impacts from Dorian. There's very high confidence in that forecast. So that is that's not the question. The question is, what specific impacts can I expect at my house, at your location? So let's jump into that. I want to give the general view, and then I want to kind of narrow it down into other specific locations. So the latest rainfall forecast that the National Hurricane Center has posted is here, and you see this tight gradient across central North Carolina. You see the greens indicating anywhere from 1 to 4 inches. You have the yellow indicating 4 to 6 inches, orange 6 to 10. And the red color indicating 10 to 15 with locally higher amounts possible in each of these categories. So keep that in mind that this is the forecast, but I highly doubt when Dorian is through and done with that the gradients of the rainfall sizes will be this smooth. They're very selective storms who can kind of have pockets of heavy rain that can, certain areas can get a lot more rain than just a couple of miles down the road. So keep that in mind. But also one thing I want to point out, not necessarily North Carolina related, but down here in central coastal South Carolina, especially near Charleston, they are really expected to get hammered from the rainfall tonight and just get relentless rainfall. And again, if we jump back to the radar, you can see why these outer bands are already starting to affect the Charleston area. And then as the storm continues and it's going to begin to curve up this way, just going to deliver quite a blow to the Charleston area, already having the storm surge being pushed on by the winds. And as those winds increase, as Dorian continues to creep up to the north and eventually turn to the northeast, Charleston's in for a pretty rough night and day early tomorrow as Dorian continues to dump rain on that location. So this is the current rainfall forecast. And again, I'm going to kind of zoom into each area in just a few moments and give more specific impacts in addition to the crawler at the bottom of the screen that has more impacts. Dennis watching and waiting from Raleigh. I'm doing the same. I am in Raleigh myself, so just kind of waiting to see what Dorian has in store for us. Thanks for watching. Tina says, at least the Waccamaw River is only 3.5 feet at Freeland Station at this time. Yeah, that's a very good point, and that brings up something I wanted to talk about. Again, comparing hurricanes is like comparing apples and oranges because each has their own set of circumstances. With Florence, with Matthew, and with Hurricane Floyd, all three major flood disasters in coastal North Carolina, those came at a time when the ground was already very saturated. The ground was already soggy. There had been lots of rain prior to those. In the case of Floyd, Hurricane Dennis had come through I believe like a week and a half earlier, and the ground was just totally saturated, so all this water that fell from Floyd had nowhere to go. Luckily, with Dorian, the silver lining to the forecast is that grounds aren't soaked and pre-saturated right now. Here in the Carolinas, we haven't had an exceptionally wet summer or early September here, so there's not a big concern with, there's not as big of a concern with inland flooding. There certainly is, though, if you're having, 6 to 10 inches dumped anywhere or over a wide area, in a couple of hours or perhaps 24 hours like we'll see from Dorian, that's still going to cause rivers to swell. Your usual suspects like the Lumber River, Waccamaw River, Tar River, Neuse River, Cape Fear River, up to possibly Roanoke River, Meherrin River. All up here are still going to, Tar River as well. Still going to probably see some minor flooding from that, but it should not be a widespread flooding disaster like the others. Number one, because Dorian is expected to keep moving and kind of, move on out and scoot out to sea quicker than any of those other 3 storms that I mentioned. And whereas Florence came in perpendicular to the coast and just sat for a while and then went back out this way, that's not going to be the case. Dorian is down here and will kind of keep on moving out this way like Matthew did a few years ago. Of course, I say that each hurricane is going to have their own consequences and their own circumstances, so we need to prepare for the worst and hope for the best. Dorian could very well dump some very heavy rain, and I was just mentioning a few moments ago, as a cold front comes and kind of sits over here in just north of North Carolina and begins to influence and interact with Dorian, there could be some enhanced rainfall all in this area well inland from Dorian. So not just from the storm itself, but there could be some extra rainfall that happens back well into the central part of North Carolina and the Midlands of South Carolina. So that's something we have to look for, and that'll become clear tomorrow midday when the outer rain bands start reaching us. We'll have to watch out for that to see if any of that moist air being pulled from the Atlantic over the continental dry, air mass here, if that enhances any rainfall. Usually it does, so we'll have to watch out for that scenario. Going on to the extreme, not the extreme, the greatest flash flood risk over the next 3 days. This is produced by the Weather Prediction Center. And anytime you see that pink shade, that's usually a pretty big red flag that a significant flooding event, at least flash flooding event, is on the way. So again, flash flood just meaning waters rise so quickly, or it has a different term out in the Midwest, or out in the Great Desert West, I should say, and in the mountains. But here, flash flood is akin to saying, the water accumulates so quickly in an area that an area becomes accessible, usually in regard to driving, or roads getting cut off, or areas getting cut off, or streams swelling so much to where their banks kind of overflow. So again, this pink shade is reserved for very extreme cases. So that is certainly concerning to see that all the way from Charleston up to here. Kind of similar to the colors that were shown during Florence. I'm not saying it's going to be a Florence, but the potential is there for some significant flooding impacts, all in this area shaded in purple from the Weather Prediction Center. This gradient does go down as you get further into central North Carolina, central South Carolina, and up into the Delmarva down here, and southeastern Virginia. The Hampton Roads area still has a slight risk for some flooding issues, but the worst of this storm appears to be kind of in this area where the significant flooding will take place. Again, we can see that on the current radar, the outer bands are just going to be relentlessly pounding this area while that happens. So that's why that area is highlighted in that pink shade. The eye wall has expanded to about 50 miles now as well, so the eye does not have to be onshore to cause flooding issues, and that is something we'll have to watch out for to see just how much rain those areas will get. Right now, forecast to get anywhere between 5 to 10 inches, locally higher amounts. So we have to watch that and see what kind of flooding risk Dorian will pose. In addition to this is limited to coastal residents only, which hopefully should not be many people, because they should have evacuated by this point. A lot of evacuations have been placed in order for all the barrier islands. So if you hear the word barrier island in forecast, what you're hearing, or what you need to refer to, is all these that are separated by a sound or something. So all these islands that are kind of act as a barrier to the mainland. So where you have your Topsail Beach, your Wrightsville Beach, your Surf City, and all those areas are on barrier islands. So surge is possible to do this, and this product is kind of clunky. It's coming from the National Hurricane Center. You can access it on their advisory page. But what you're seeing is the layers. If you have blue greater than a foot above dry ground, yellow is greater than 3 feet above ground, 6 feet above ground is orange, and then the red color is greater than 9 feet above ground. It's kind of hard to see with a pixel, and looking in here, it's not going to be very evident to you looking on your screen of your electronic device. It's better looked at on a desktop computer, by yourself, to look at your specific area. But again, this looks a lot worse than it is right here. This includes the estuary and intertidal zone, so I can actually turn that off, so it doesn't look so severe, because that's usually flooded. That's the estuary habitat here. So I meant to click that off before I clicked here, but again, New Bern's at risk at seeing some potential storm surge flooding from Dorian. All this area down in here, Wilmington less so, but the barrier islands could still face some very rough surf and some coastal inundation. Ocracoke Island has been evacuated, and anyone left on the island has been ordered to shelter in place. Could have some surge issues there. So again, when you have the storm moving up this way, and I'm going to zoom out so I can draw on this picture here, when you have the hurricane out in this area, and then you have, the winds ahead of it, it's rotating counterclockwise, because it's an area of low pressure, and in the northern hemisphere, low pressure rotates counterclockwise, and you have this water being pushed up against the coastline. And in the case of North Carolina's unique geography, you have water breaking through the barrier islands into the Pamlico Sound, and then in the Inner Banks area, and the more susceptible areas up here. And then once the storm passes, you have that water, evacuated away from the coast, and you can have very low surf. So kind of a unique situation there. But ahead of the storm is when the worst coastal inundation and storm surge would occur. So that's something we have to watch out for, especially down here in where the coastline curves in like that. That is a very favorable location for that storm surge to cause problems, because the water has nowhere to go but inland when you get in these unique little cove areas. And as Dorian continues to move up this way, if the eye of the hurricane ends up somewhere around here by this time tomorrow night or something, or early Friday morning, we'll really have to watch out for some severe flooding impacts anywhere from Myrtle Beach up here to Wilmington, and up here into Jacksonville, Camp Lejeune area, and things like that. So that's something we'll have to watch out for Dorian in terms of that. So switching from water to wind, I want to talk about wind impacts, and then after this slide I'm going to go into specific area-based impacts grouped by county and grouped by city. So if you're wondering about your location, be sure to just hang tight for just a moment, and then I'll get to that. You can also see it crawling at the bottom of the screen here. I've created a little marquee that goes, and you can look at your specific location. They're in order from coast to inland, so because the areas at the coast have the highest impacts, so I listed them first on the scroll, and it will keep repeating throughout the entire broadcast. I'll also post this on Facebook. The information that's in the crawl, I'll post it on Facebook after this live stream is over. Thanks to everyone who tuned in. If you have any questions, feel free to comment down here at this post below, and I'll get to them as soon as I can, or if I can't answer, I'll direct you to someone who can, just discussing this, and then I'm going to get into some specific area-based, some specific area impact-based kind of analysis, and see what Dorian will bring to certain areas. So just hang tight if you're waiting for that. So in terms of the earliest reasonable arrival time of tropical storm force winds, this is tomorrow morning is when we're looking at that. So it's kind of the 0 hour for Dorian, as it's sitting down here in this, kind of nestled perfectly in this little cove of the southeast coast. It's going to continue trekking overnight, and we're usually asleep for 8 to 10 hours, perhaps 12. So it's going to make up a lot of ground, and by the time we're all waking up tomorrow, by daybreak tomorrow, some of those tropical storm force wind gusts could be arriving in the southern part of the state, specifically the Sandhills, southeastern North Carolina, Wilmington, Lumberton, Clinton, Elizabethton, Bladenboro, areas like that are going to be the first in the state to feel those winds kind of build in. And I don't have a model, or there's not access to a good model online for free that has early or reasonably estimated windfall estimates. So Tina says, I need some ash wind arrival times. I remember speaking to you during Florence down in Brunswick County. So you're likely going to start seeing those tropical storm force winds tomorrow morning sometime. I would suspect maybe between 7 a.m. and 10 a.m. is when you'll start to have those sustained winds where the trees just don't really stop moving, and you'll probably get those winds that start howling about tropical storm force, later tomorrow afternoon into tomorrow around sunset is when most of the state's going to begin feeling the real presence of Dorian in the form of those tropical storm force winds. John asked, do you agree with the NAM showing a Wilmington landfall and a much more western track? Certainly possible. NAM is historically not as superior with guessing the track of tropical cyclones. Couldn't get my words out there. Historically, it's not as superior to the European, the EC MWF, or the American model at doing so, but there are some things to discuss, so I do want to quickly touch on that. Going back to the satellite image here before I jump into the area-based impacts and county by county, city by city, there can be some interesting interactions with the land and friction. So John, you asked a great question. With the storm currently being out here, long-term models are made to excel in the long term. So the GFS and the European model are made to kind of predict where large-scale weather systems or synoptic level, weather systems, even mesoscale weather systems are meant to go. Well, I guess that's not entirely true. They're more based on synoptic weather systems, so big storms and things like that. So with the NAM, which is the North American Mesoscale model, and they deal better with mesoscale systems. Hurricane Dorian is a big system, and I think that model may not be as reliable for this. So I'm beating all around. I'm going all over the place. But what I'm trying to say here is a western track is certainly more possible. The current track takes it up very close. That's not quite as accurate. Takes it up and comes very close. It actually has a landfall near Cape Lookout and Cape Hatteras up here as it continues to brush off to the northeast and accelerate. A western track is certainly possible if frictional impacts begin to, if it begins to interact with this cold front, or the cold front is slower as it comes into North Carolina. It could sneak a bit farther west of this track, which of course a small shift in the track would have major impacts felt inland. And if the eye of the hurricane goes over Wilmington, you're going to be in the worst of the weather, which currently the eyewall is forecast to stay just offshore. I believe maybe about 20 miles offshore. So with the eye continually expanding, impacts are going to be the same, but a western track is much more possible, and that's kind of been the trend of models in the past couple of days because Dorian is kind of intensifying and it's becoming a little bit harder to steer, if you will, and it's having these big wobbles in its track. So a more western track is certainly possible and not out of the question. I think that the National Hurricane Center track is maybe a bit more likely at this point, staying just offshore, but would not be surprised that obviously Dorian kind of jumped inland a little bit and kind of hugged the coast more. Yes, Tina, you do have time to relocate. I would complete all preparations by lunchtime tomorrow, though. All right, so moving on to specific impacts. So I'm going to go by the National Weather Service forecast for areas and things called CWAs. So they're called County Warning Areas. And this is the one for Raleigh, North Carolina. So Raleigh is based right here. If you're in the Raleigh area, you're familiar with the Beltline. That is this feature right in here. Same thing on this graph. And they produce these graphics for tropical systems. And I've just taken these off the website and I called it wind and rain. So the yellow is kind of the level 1 risk, if you will, and the orange is level 2 risk. Red, depicted here, is level 3 risk, and that's as high as it goes. I think there is a purple for extreme risk, but that's not included in any of these graphics I'm about to show you in the next couple of minutes. So these are all the counties here. So listen for your county. If you live in Forsyth County, Guilford County, Alamance County, Orange County, Person County, Randolph County, Davidson County, Stanley County, or Montgomery County, or the northwestern half of Anson County, I really don't think your impacts are going to be very limited from Dorian. You may have some gusty winds, you may have some scattered rain showers. It's really not going to be an impactful weather event for you, though. Power outages are unlikely. Rainfall accumulations maybe to an inch or more, if that, but don't be surprised if you really don't have anything from Dorian. If you live in Richmond County, Scotland County, Hope County, Moore County, Sanford or Lee County, Harnett County, Chatham County, Durham County, Wake County, Franklin County, up to Warren County, Halifax County, Nash County, you are in that kind of strange area where you're in the battleground for, how far inland will those rain bands get. If Dorian continues to expand in size, ignore that warning box. I was trying to do something that I can't on this page. I was trying to mark on this, but I actually can't. You're in this battleground zone, so I'm going to kind of highlight it while I'm talking. If you're in this zone and here, you could see some, rain. You could have some gusty winds up to, 35, perhaps 40 miles per hour. But it really just depends on how that outer rain band sets up. If the storm hugs the coast, like John had mentioned a few minutes ago, some models have it coming farther inland. If that is the case, then this area will get those tropical storm force winds. Some power outages are possible. You'll get, a little bit more rain. But if it continues to go a little bit more offshore, this area may be just like our friends in the gray here that don't get much of anything except some gusty winds and perhaps some rain showers. I see someone asking about Robeson County. I'll get to that question in a moment because that's actually in the next little group of counties here. If you live in Cumberland County, Johnston County, Wilson County, Edgecombe County, Wayne County, Sampson County, you are in that kind of zone where you start getting to more significant impacts, probably quite a few more power outages, heavier rain, perhaps up to, 2 to 4 inches of rain, gusty winds up to, 30 to 40 miles per hour with gusts up to 50, not out of the question. And this all translates as well to rain. So, you have this red area for rain where, 4 to 6 inches, perhaps more, are possible. But this all translates as well to both of these areas where wind and rain is going to be confined to mainly east of Interstate 95 here. So 95 is this blue line that transverses kind of the middle of this graphic here. You can trace it on both of these areas. And if you're south and east of that line of Interstate 95, you're likely to see the worst impacts from Dorian itself. So in terms of Robeson County, we are now going to get over to you. This is from the National Weather Service in Wilmington. So this was Raleigh. Now we're jumping to Wilmington, and their counties of responsibility are in here. So you notice the big change here is the red color, and that's because down at the coast, logically, the closer to the coast you are, the worse the impacts are going to be from Dorian. So that follows logic, that makes sense. But then well inland, Philip says, assume the flooding will not be anything like we experienced with Matthew and Florence, Robeson County. Yeah, Robeson County is in this kind of moderate area here where you could still have some significant rain, some significant wind, but I do not foresee it being anything like Matthew and Florence for 2 reasons. 1, it's a much faster moving storm. Number 2, we are not pre-saturated and the grounds aren't soaked or saturated like were for both of those events. With Matthew, we were very wet ahead of time. In Florence, it hung around for nearly 3 days. You could walk faster than the storm was moving at some points in time. So I do not foresee it being anything like that. Definitely going to have probably some washed out roads, some fallen trees blocking roads. It's going to be inconvenient, but I don't think it's going to be any kind of flooding disaster for Robeson County, for Bladen County. Bladen County is a location where we got 30 inches or plus of rain from Florence. I do not foresee that happening. That would be extremely unexpected for all forecasters in the entire weather enterprise if that were to happen. I really do not see that happening. But of course, as you get into Columbus County here, into Brunswick County, New Hanover County, Pender County, that's when the impacts start getting pretty rough. Winds of 50 to 70 mile per hour, likely with gusts up to 100 possible. Not out of the question for winds to get that high if the center of the storm is just off coast here. Down here, I'm going to try to do my South Carolina counties. So we have, I don't know if I can do that. So we have Dillon County down here. We have Horry County over here. And I'm not going to try to stab the rest I need to brush up on my South Carolina counties. But again, the wind and rain impacts are pretty much the same on both of these. You can draw this line and extrapolate it into South Carolina. Down into Charleston would still be in this high risk area here for extensive wind, extensive rain. And then as you go inland, those decrease. So jumping over to our next area, we have the National Weather Service in Morehead City, Newport. So these are our central coastal counties. So along the Outer Banks, of course, you're going to have some significant impacts from coastal erosion. I highly expect us to hear in the news come this weekend that North Carolina Highway 12 is either washed out somewhere or flooded, or something has happened, because North Carolina Highway 12 is infamous for doing that. It's a very susceptible road along the Cape Hatteras National Seashore. So I'm sure that we will have some problems out there. Down here in Carteret County, Onslow County, so Camp Lejeune, Jacksonville area, down here in Morehead City, areas up down in here, Belhaven, Pelletier up in here, Pamlico County, Hyde County. We have Dare County up here, Terrell County, all within this range of having these significant impacts, because again, the track I can't draw on this page because of the way I've pulled it up here, but the track's expected to go just out here, if not clip this area of Cape Lookout up to Cape Hatteras. So some very significant impacts likely for these areas out here. In Plymouth County, in Martin County, Pitt County, Greene County, Lenoir County, Duplin County, Jones County, Craven County, the western half of Beaufort County. Probably not seeing, this is Washington County, by the way. I said Plymouth County, that's inaccurate. Seeing some significant impacts, Greenville, a lot of people in here. ECU has canceled classes. Eastern Carolina University has canceled classes for Thursday and Friday in anticipation of that. UNCW has canceled classes down in Wilmington. And, of course, areas all in here are just going to be subject to, I think, a prolonged period of wind and rain. So that's going to be something we have to look out for with Dorian, to see just what kind of track it takes is going to be critical to figuring out who has the worst impacts from this. And you see the rain expanded much farther inland here, so the wind may be isolated to just where the track is, but the rain's going to be widespread here in the coastal plain of North Carolina. Again, not to the level of Matthew or Florence or Floyd, if you can remember back to 1999 and Floyd. I don't think the impacts are going to be that bad, but we're still going to have a very significant flooding situation. More flash flooding than inland river flooding. The rivers are going to swell. Tar River may get mighty angry, pretty high. The Roanoke River, Cape Fear River, Black River, White Oak River may get pretty angry and swell quite a bit, but I don't foresee it being a big inland flooding disaster. I think this is going to be more of a coastal surge and a wind structural damage wind event for eastern North Carolina, with flash flooding being just as significant in these areas shaded in red. You can use this as a proxy for power outages as well. So the red power outages are almost certain, very, very likely. When you have that combination of wind and rain, power outages are very likely in that area. So if you missed any of those, you can feel free to go back and review them. I'm going to copy and paste some more information about each location as well right after this video ends. And I want to start winding down here. I want to show you two things. The National Weather Service does not currently have an app for iPhone or Android or anything like that, but something I do to kind of cheat around that. If you have Twitter, you can download it on your phone. You can jump over to the National Weather Service Raleigh page, so you can just search NWS Raleigh, and you'll come to this page here, and you can click this little bell with a plus sign, and what that does is that sends you mobile notifications. So it's like getting a text message from the National Weather Service Raleigh whenever they tweet, and they tweet a lot more than they post on Facebook. So I'm delivering this through Facebook Live. I'm also active on Twitter at Andrew WX Center, all one word. But National Weather Service Raleigh tweets as well, and that's a great way to get information. Even if your power is out, you can click the plus sign here and get information from the NWS Raleigh, and you can do this for other. So if we wanted to switch to Wilmington, we could type in Wilmington up here into the URL bar and have National Weather Service Wilmington come up, and that does not seem to work. I think we have to type in North Carolina and not Wilmington, Ohio. So here we have this page. You could do this as well, where you click the little bell. Now I will get a message from Twitter on my phone every time that I tweet, every time that they tweet in important information. So, if there's an emergency, like, say that the rain does get pretty bad, and you say that, the Cape Fear River hypothetically starts to swell, and they tweet out, people in this area susceptible to flooding from Cape Fear River need to evacuate. You have that information on hand now if you don't have power to get it any other way. Another account that I would recommend following is North Carolina Emergency Management. So they are the emergency management, enterprise for the entire state. Again, just go on, search NC Emergency Management, click this little bell, and you will be notified if they tweet anything about the storm. So that's all I had to say about that. I thought it was pretty neat that you can kind of go on and kind of make your own little notifications for that as well. You can do the same on Facebook, but most of those pages do not post on Facebook nearly as often as they tweet. So be sure to do that. So I'm going to leave here. We're at about, we had that strange pause in the feed there, but it looks like we're about 33 minutes or so. So I'm going to wind down here, and I'm going to post the specific impacts on Facebook as well and kind of outline that. But I want to emphasize that Dorian is a strong storm. Do not be fooled by Category 2, Category 3, whatever it is when it comes to the Carolinas. It's going to be an active weather day, so worst impact starting midday tomorrow, lasting through midday on Friday. People listening in the Hampton Roads area, Friday could be a bit of a surprise weather day for you, where you have some significant rain and gusty winds early Friday into Friday afternoon. So just keep that in mind. I'm sure power outages are going to really start to mount by tomorrow. Looks like some of these outer bands are starting to impact the coast of South Carolina, so a long night ahead for them. And Dorian will start to be felt up in the Carolinas, further into the Carolinas, so further into North Carolina by tomorrow midday and tomorrow night. Make sure you have any preparations completed by midday tomorrow. So let's set noon as your cutoff time. So tie down loose lawn furniture, bring your pets inside, have your flashlights ready, put bottles of water in the freezer to freeze, and then they can thaw out if your power goes out. Make sure you park your cars close to the garage door if they're not in your garage, to limit weaknesses in structure. Your garage door is usually the first thing to go in houses and high winds, because it's a very susceptible thing there. Have batteries, run to the store and get a portable battery charger. Make sure your generators are outside, make sure they're cranked up. All kinds of things, a huge checklist of things you can do. So make sure you go through all of that. Make sure that you are good to go for an impactful couple of weather days, and we'll see what Dorian does in the Carolinas. If you have any questions, feel free to comment here, tweet me on Twitter, send me an email if you want. And yeah, I do have the luxury of kind of giving more individual attention. I'm not affiliated with any news source or any kind of TV or anything like that, so I do have the ability to give some more, invest in your time as well. So thank you for the kind words, Tina and Bill. I appreciate that. This is my passion. It's what I love to do. It's what my degree is in now. So that is my goal, and I hope to reach as many people as possible to try to spread as most accurate information as possible to prepare for high impact weather like Dorian. So I'm going to sign off here. Thanks for tuning in, everyone, and feel free to share this broadcast. And I will see you all, electricity permitting, I will see you all tomorrow afternoon or evening with another update. So we'll see what Dorian brings our way. Thanks for watching, and be safe.